Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Way T Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And I'm so excited today because we have Matthew Kenney joining us. And I've got a great history. I'm going to tell you all about it, but let me give you the read off. This is I always find this interesting. We got like 4 tiny paragraphs of an incredible lifestyle. But Matthew, you are one of the world's first leading chefs at the forefront of plant-based cuisine, an author of 12 cookbooks and a best-selling memoir, a culinary educator, and CEO of Matthew Kenney Cuisine, a multifaceted lifestyle company specializing in plant-based cuisine throughout several unique markets. Matthew Kenney graduated from the French Culinary Institute, and after working in upscale New York City kitchens, opened a number of his own highly regarded restaurants in New York and along the East Coast. He has earned several awards, including being named one of America's Best New Chefs by Food and Wine magazine, and was twice nominated as a Rising Star Chef in America by the James Beard Foundation. Matthew has appeared on numerous food and talk shows and regular lectures on the subject of food and health, including 2 highly watched TEDx talks. Matthew, welcome to the podcast.
Pleasure.
Well, I was just talking before you got here, and you got your beautiful restaurant just literally a couple blocks away. Me and my lady love going there. It's so much fun. And you really taking, originally I got exposed to you, I think it was in 2004, you had Raw Food, Real World, and you had your restaurant out in New York City.
Pure Food and Wine, yeah.
Correct. And what was astounding about it is you took something that was, people kind of think of raw food at the time was, you know, people with like broccoli hanging out of their face and a poncho on and wearing only hemp clothing and, you know, with crystal bowls. And you really made kind of like this culinary experience that was super unique. I don't think anybody had really done it at that time. I'm curious of how your journey from starting out and getting interested in food and going through the formalized training got to that point.
Yeah, it was, it was really a long, slow process, and then it all came at once. I grew up on the coast of Maine, hunting. I was a hunter.
I'm from New Brunswick, just across the border.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I was hunting and fishing, and I don't even think I heard the word vegan growing up in Maine. I wouldn't have known what one was.
They would have beat them up or something. Yeah.
I went to college and moved to New York City after college, planning to go to law school. And I'd always been into health and wellness, so I'd run, get up in the morning and go for a run before high school, go to the gym. I was one of the only people in my high school that went to the gym, because in those days, weightlifting was supposed to be bad for sports.
Correct.
Right?
I was in the same situation.
So the basketball coach was, always pushing back against that, ridiculing me for working out. And but I also got into healthy eating. The guy who owned the gym in my town, he had been a bodybuilder, professional bodybuilder, and I'd go in his kitchen and it's all like raw almonds and whole grain pastas and so forth. He wasn't vegan, but I just took note of that because he was one of the healthiest people I knew, and started preparing my own meals in high school. Nothing gourmet, wasn't fancy, and it also wasn't vegan. But I really had an attachment to feeling my best. Health and wellness was really important to me, even with the limited education that I had. So I moved to New York, ended up falling in love with the energy around restaurants, because New York City's cultural diversity and, the pulse of the city is in restaurants.
It's intense.
And being slightly introverted, restaurants felt like a way that I could be communicating with our audience, but still I could go stay in the kitchen if I wanted to. So I went to French culinary school instead of law school.
That's a big difference, right?
Yeah, and became a chef, and I fell in love with that, and it was natural for me. And spent about 10 years building a small company of restaurants and a catering business. Wrote a couple books and developed a couple of product lines. But there was kind of like a dichotomy between my personal life and cooking this food with excess salt and animal products, and so I could go out and have a great meal and then not feel great the next day. And I really believe that it's possible to indulge every day and still have optimal health. So it was a long story. Somebody took me to a vegan restaurant, and it was kind of strange. The food was a little strange, and I left thinking, wow, if this can be done in an elevated manner, it can really change the way we think about food and change the way we think about vegetables. So that's when it started, and the first project after that was Pure Food and Wine.
Wow. And you know, funny you should say that you had that thought, because that was the exact experience that I had and many of my friends when we got exposed to gourmet vegetarian cuisine, which you're really the godfather of that whole industry, which is pretty amazing. What was it like getting started in the industry with something that was, you know, I mean, it's a pretty intense tradition inside of like French culinary cuisine, and you're going to break away and kind of do your own thing. What was the response like from a career path side of it? Like, did the other chefs think you were crazy? Was it well received? Did they like the idea? Investors, like, well, how did that all work out for you?
You know, there were some that were more progressive, like chefs, for example, like Alain Ducasse came into our restaurant. You know, he came back again, I think a couple of days later. And, you know, there were a lot of curious people, but then others would come in. This restaurateur, Joe Bostanich, came in and he said, yeah, it's good, I don't get it. You know, and the food critic from the New York Times said everything tastes like a salad, which is very, you know, in my mind, very narrow-minded. So the media that had been following me and supporting me for years stopped. You know,
Wow.
well, you know, I don't know if it's like a sense of being threatened or...
That's what it seems to be.
These days, it's totally opposite. Like, plant-based
Right.
gets as much media attention as anything. But, yeah, the food and wines and gourmets of the world, you know, we stopped getting invited pretty much to events. We stopped getting written about. The mainstream food critics didn't really acknowledge it. Consumers weren't ready to spend money on plants, so you had to sell things at a pretty low price and lose money. And landlords were, you know, rarely interested in having a vegan restaurant in their building. It's the opposite now. Mm-hmm. And the financial markets weren't supporting it. So pretty much every odd that you can have against you was present in those days.
What do you think for you in that situation where you're building a career for yourself essentially, and you're passionate about doing things in a different way, and you're, you know, some of probably the people that you looked up to are kind of frowning down on it, or it seems like, you know, maybe your friends in the chef world are saying, hey, Matthew, you know, this vegan thing's kind of cool, but, you know, I don't know where that's going to go. What gave you the fortitude to kind of keep forging forward? Because really that's what a pioneer does. You know, the pioneer goes where other people aren't willing to go, or take the, you know, the arrows of, or being a futurist. What drove you during that time?
You know, just a few times in my life, I felt like I had a vision for something that was aligned with, you know, our best path. And I love food and wine, and I always struggled with how bad it can make you feel when it's good. And I always, you know, wanted to attain optimal wellness, and just, it was really just so clear to me that, you know, a chef's role is to really not only feed and entertain, but to nourish the environment. And it's just the most alignment I had ever experienced. That's this path. So yeah, I just always was motivated by the fact that if I don't keep going, then I'm not going to be able to share this with people. I'm not going to be able to show what can be done, teach others how to do it. Looking back, I sometimes wonder, because the first 10 years were really tough. Mm-hmm. You know, there were some very, very hard weeks and months. But yeah, it was just a very clear, you know, vision I had. So lucky that I, you know, was able to stick it out.
Where did you feel that things were maybe the lowest point, and then what was the turning point, if you will, that kind of set your career to where it is, to, like, you know, set the direction where you started saying, you know what, things are starting to change from those early years?
There were a lot of low points, you know, when you pour your energy and creativity into a project and it doesn't become commercially successful, you know, guests aren't appreciating it. Having a restaurant that you feel is like the best one in the world next to something that you think might be mediocre, and they're packed and you're empty, that, you know, mm-hmm. Those days are hard. There were a lot of financial, you know, near-death experiences where you just had no capital to operate at all. Yeah. So, you know, I don't know which point, but there were quite a few of them. And And then, it started coming around about the time we opened Plant Food and Wine, which was 6 years ago, I guess. So,
wow, so it's a really long journey that you went on, that kind of, wavy sine wave kind of line, and then now things have kind of totally changed in another direction. You've got a culinary school, you've got this expansive, every time I go to your website, I see there's more restaurants around the world that are opening up. So what changed? What do you think happened?
Well, all those things that I spoke about before came around. The plant-based investing, for example, is one of the hottest, financial sectors now. Mm-hmm. The media is well acquainted with plant-based, and it's, included in every restaurant list, Michelin guides, and so forth. Daniel Hume from 11 Madison Park, which is one of the best restaurants in the world. It actually was #1 in the world a couple years ago. Just stated that he was going to reopen post-pandemic as a plant-based restaurant, with the exception of honey or something. So that's unheard of. The media's got their eyes on everything, and it's a hot career. People are interested in sustainability, so we're able to draw like some of the best talent into plant-based. Like all of our innovation team in the test kitchen are, Michelin level background chefs, super talented. None of them came from the vegan world, but they see this as a new creative outlet. So all the things that were preventing it from working before slowly, fell into place, and the demand, of course, from the consumer is a big part of it. And I think the product has just gotten much better. I look back at what I was doing at Pure Food and Wine. I appreciate you saying what you said, but looking back, I'm like, well, I didn't know anything. I knew how to make it, look good and taste good, but our repertoire was very limited. So I could build a menu, but now we could build 100 menus because of the know-how and the technique that we've developed over the years. So,
I think this is really, I know there's a number of chefs and budding chefs and people who love to make beautiful food and healthy food and plant-based food who follow your work, but might not know how you do this in the test kitchens. And what does it really take to, I go down to your vegetable udon soup I have down here all the time, right? It's amazing. It's this almond milk, and it's got these really subtle spices in it, and the noodle. What does it take to actually produce a dish like that? How many tests does it take? How do you put these things together? To me, it's just it's amazing. I have no idea how this works. How does it work for an ignorant person like myself who is not, who appreciates the food but doesn't know what it takes to craft it?
Well, we have a few more layers than most restaurant groups of investment and innovation. Everybody's process is different. Good chefs can go in the kitchen and grab things and make something that's good, but it may not be a dish like that one, which has stood the test of time. That particular dish was actually created by someone I worked with for 15 years. He worked with me at Plant Food and Wine, Pure Food and Wine in New York years ago. But a typical restaurant, the chef is running the business and overseeing the menu development. And I always felt like running a restaurant and creating a restaurant are two totally different things.
Right.
So even before I could afford it, I started to make an investment in having a test kitchen. Now our test kitchen has, I guess, 7 chefs that are developing content for the restaurants, working with the chefs of the restaurants who have to be great managers to train them and brainstorm ideas. Of course, they're involved in the creation too. But we really document it, standardize it, photograph it, prepare video if it's for education. So we just invest a lot of time and energy. We opened today, a few hours ago, we opened a drive-through in Costa Mesa called Vegged. It's between a McDonald's and a Chipotle, and across the street from Taco Bell. We're right in the middle. So
where's that location exactly? Give us the
Costa Mesa. It's on Bristol. I forget the exact address. It was about 40 minutes from here.
That's great.
So fast food is actually more complicated than high-end dining, because we can make adjustments in the kitchen at Plant Food and Wine, but when you're doing it for a drive-through, you have to prepare it in 3.5 minutes. It has to be the same every time because people will remember that. And the burger the burger that we do there, and we're not relying on Beyond Meat or Impossible, it's all plant-based ingredients. I think that the chef who oversaw that particular project probably tested it 40, 50 times.
Right.
So by the time the restaurant opens, he doesn't want to eat it anymore.
And typically to develop a dish, like how many tests would you have to do? I mean, obviously you got someone who kind of knows, okay, here's what the outcome is that I want, but I've got to create these combinations to put it together, so they kind of know this goes with this, that doesn't go with that. Like, how do you, I'm curious about how you actually conceive and then drive that and then make the adjustments. Is there a standardized process, or is it mostly just creative capabilities of the experience of the chef?
You know, our chefs are experienced enough, and we've, you know, had the same team for a long time, and they just keep getting better. So, and I know that, you know, first and foremost, the best ingredients, sourcing the best ingredients is always most important, because no amount of culinary skill or tools will compensate for that. But in our test kitchen, I think we always basically take the approach of, how does this menu feel when you read it? You know, write it. And we already have an 80% understanding of what it's going to look like and taste like, just because of the common dialogue and certain style, things we do, things we don't do. Perfecting it can take, you know, it might work the first time, but you may need to do it 30, 40 times. And it might just be one little component. It might be the cheese, like finding a cheese that melts.
Right.
Or, you know, a different type of fermentation that, you know, has a different, you know, totally different chemical reaction. Sometimes we never finish projects, like our aged cheeses, rinded cheeses, that's been going on for a couple of years. And, you know, I still don't think we have it down. So, but it depends on the product and the restaurant. We have a chocolate business in New York, and our chocolatier is really talented. I mean, same thing. I could say, well, let's do a salted, you know, Marcona almond, caramel, nougat, chocolate, and I pretty much know what he's going to make. And
wow.
Yeah.
What do you think are the elements that make a great chef? Like, what are the, you know, like if I was to talk about football or athletics or something, there's kind of like certain determinant factors that would allow a person to be successful in those fields. What do you think it is for being a chef, and particularly a plant-based chef?
Yeah, I mean, there are 5 or 6 factors. I think that, you know, the ability to identify a personalized style, which is much more fun if you can really, you know, create a new path. I felt like liberated once I was able to never look at a cookbook again, because I used to get so much inspiration from cookbooks, reading other menus, and it took a lot of travel, a lot of experimentation, and just a lot of maturity in the industry. But now, you know, I don't look at that for inspiration. I might look at art or fashion or music for inspiration in an abstract way. So I think, you know, getting comfortable enough and experienced enough to develop a personalized style, even if it's always changing, which it will. And then, you know, management. But I don't even like the word management. That's why to me it's always team. You know, we're a team, like a basketball team, or being able to assemble a really good team. And, you know, sometimes that means giving somebody more freedom and letting go of ego and control, which is another word I don't like. Other times it's, you know, finding somebody who you might think is a little bit of a punk, you know, but like realizing that they have, like, he's like Dennis Rodman of you know, the NBA, great rebounder. So we just had to make sure he gets back from Vegas.
Time for the game.
But I remember reading Phil Jackson's book, biography. But yeah, management and, you know, a lot of it's instinct. He's a local here in Venice, and he's one of my good friends, and he told me one time one of the best lessons, because I think as a chef we go into it thinking, okay, if we have great food and the business runs properly, the service is good, the kitchen's running efficiently, then it's going to be great. But my friend said, look, he said every business is the same. It's operations, finance, and marketing. And, you know, it didn't listen right away, but I realized over time, like, everything we do is marketing. We have to tell our story. It's not just about selling and getting press. Marketing is really like helping people understand why we're passionate, what is our narrative, and it can feel repetitive, but, you know, it takes a while to get through. And so yeah, those are But but the great chef, I mean, it depends on the size of the business. If its chef is a multi-unit operator, things like that, also important.
So, over the last few years, there's been an explosion, I would say, in your brand. I mean, it's like I see all these different restaurants with your name on it and stuff. Can you explain people what's happened there? How did this all transpire from the guy that was struggling to get his restaurant open and following and essentially forging a new path in the industry, and to now, it just seems like home run after home run after home run. Like what is it? What's happened in your industry and your business now that's causing that? Other than we've kind of assessed those economic drivers, and there's certainly a business component that you can actually produce a successful business, which is above and beyond just the food and just the sourcing and all that stuff, right? What is that magic combination that's allowed so much people to experience your wares, I guess that's what I would say.
Well, we didn't talk, I don't mean me, I just mean the society didn't talk about brand that much, right? Until 10 years ago? Mm-hmm. Was it something like that? 15?
Yeah.
It wasn't really about brand, and brand to me means something different than being branded and having your story. Brand to me, to be really ready to scale, has to be experienced enough to have built a team, depending on what kind of company it is. But in my case, I knew exactly where I wanted to go from the beginning. As soon as I left Pure Food and Wine, which was after the first year or two, because I had opened that with a former partner, and we went our own way, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do because I saw so much runway in the plant-based space. But I also wanted to create a company. I like to create, and I like to do a lot of different things, but I didn't want to have competing interests. So I thought, how can I build a brand that will house everything that I could possibly ever want to do? Because I love fashion. So we're now developing a line of like really cool athleisure wear hoodies and organic, sustainable, with a fashion designer friend of mine. I love interior design and music and restaurants, of course, and architecture, gardening, farming. I mean, I like writing. So I basically created this framework for where the company would grow to. And, I knew that we would have 6 categories: hospitality, education, media, licenses, services, and products. And everything I could ever dream of wanting to do fits into one of those segments. So I knew we couldn't do it all at once. The most important thing is to really get your footing and your identity and systems in place. Like, for example, when we sign a restaurant lease, which happens weekly these days, we signed one yesterday, we have our critical path. It's 167 things that we do between now and when we open. And we can, update that for that restaurant. But it took years in the industry,
of course,
to figure out what's in that critical path. So the goal is to be as systemic and standardized as you can, which allows you to be creative, because you're not bogged down like, oh, how do I do this? What am I forgetting? You have to build a team over time that has the common language. We were ready for expansion, and it's very scalable a model. The faster we grow, we add regional leaders, and we add to our innovation team, and each department basically, which is operations, creative, front of house operations, back of house, finance. So each part of the team is scalable as long as you have strong leadership and strong systems. We are growing fast. We're opening about 20 restaurants in the next 12 months, I think.
That's a crazy speed.
Yeah, my team thinks that too. But 12 restaurants. We have a frozen pizza line coming out. We're expanding our frozen food line. We just launched chocolate. And then we're doing a global subscription model, which would be kind of an app with content app. We're involved, like I said, in the indoor farming, and we have projects, all over the world. A lot of licensing, like in the Middle East. We're opening something, I think, in the Maldives, and another one, I gotta remember to call them, in Mauritius.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So when you're licensing, how would that differ from your restaurant? Is that so someone says, hey, I'd like to hire you to kind of design the menu or the restaurant options that we have at our facility or hotel or whatever, we want to do that? Or is that different than, like, your business proper? Like how do those different things, because it seems so funny that people think, oh, we know him as a chef, but here you have this multifaceted brand that has all these components and these business components and licensing, and people might think, well, wow, that there's so much more to you than meets the eye.
Yeah, licensing, we treat everything like our own, except each partner's different. So we do a lot of work with the Four Seasons hotels. We're in 4 or 5 of their properties, and they're amazing operators. Speaking about culture and operations, like their training program is phenomenal.
Yes.
I've never seen, someone working at a Four Seasons hotel who wasn't friendly. And so it's pretty easy for us. We can do the initial training, and it's going to run as well as we would run it ourselves, sometimes probably even better. There are other hotels where we're involved from the ground up, kitchen design, restaurant design, going 4 times a year to help support. So each one is different, but we treat them the same. I think the big difference is the economic model. It's just royalty-based and fee and royalty-based, and the components that we don't get involved in. So we're usually not involved in day-to-day operations, finance, legal, all of that. So it's kind of nice because it's a good creative outlet.
You talk about a couple of areas that we chatted before that you're interested in, diversity, and also I think with sourcing. What do those things mean to you, and how do you, I guess, curate to make sure that you get the best products to support your restaurants? Because I'm in the supplement industry, and I know it's a deep dive to really get the premium product from wherever, and you got to kind of go deep on that. And then, of course, I think eventually you get to a point where you start making or farming your own products so that you can guarantee what you get. What's that like for you?
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: supercharge your protein shake. Everyone knows protein shakes are a great way to sneak in extra protein, build more muscle, even replace meals and burn more fat. The problem is the highest quality protein typically absorbs at around 40%. One way to fix this and dramatically increase how quickly and effective your protein shake digests is to add 2 to 3 capsules of Masszymes into your shake. One research study showed that pre-digested protein during a meal increased muscle growth significantly. To take advantage of this, just blend the open capsules into your shake, and within 15 minutes or less, the enzymes will have begun to break down the protein into amino acids. This can make your shakes at least 2 to 3 times more potent. Some people do this and sip on their shake while lifting to provide their muscles with a steady stream of amino acids during their workout. To save 10% on Masszymes, use the code SHAKE10, that's SHAKE10, at Masszymes.com. That's SHAKE10 at Masszymes.com.
Well, the beauty with the plant-based industry is that the number of categories that we, if you walk into Whole Foods, for example, most people walk through the entire store, right? I know exactly where, I need to go. It's there, and there are other areas I don't need to go to the dairy section or the fish section or the butcher. And it's the same thing with our business. It's mostly plants. So we usually find somebody who's got the best supply of, local, organic, whenever possible, sustainable ingredients. And to the extent we have any growing space, like we have a little bit of plant food and wine, we'll also supplement that with what we can grow. But it's really important. I'm not as involved in the sourcing of ingredients now, but for example, a few years ago when we opened in Sydney, Australia, got off the plane, dropped my suitcase, went foraging, and then the next morning got up at 4 a.m. and went to the huge produce market. So really connecting with where the food's coming from and doing that in any market we go to, and then building on those relationships.
That's super cool. So, and you're into clothing, so you talk about diversity. What does diversity mean for you? Because I mean, you're about as diverse as it gets by the sounds of it, with all these different offerings that you have and how your business career has kind of emerged out of your chef career. And, now you've got all these different areas. What does that mean to you, and how do you navigate being an artist and a business person, something who's looking to make the world a better place?
I think, everything's creative. I mean, structuring a business, building a brand, it's really creative. I mean, you need to work with people who who can push, but diversity is so important. If one thing we learned from the pandemic, how important that is. The first thing we did was pivot, and instead of furloughing people at our company level, we actually hired and went into studio right away and started filming, and we launched our online education business because everybody was home wanting to learn how to cook.
Right.
So instead of the projected 100 students that we thought we'd get the first month, we had 500 the first few hours. Yeah, I mean, technology, super important, and I like it. I like things that can scale without brick and mortar. Things I don't even understand, AI. I would try to understand where all this is going to. Agri-tech is a big thing, and how that can be applied. So we're always going through a shift, not just now, always. Our model is always changing, and it will have a major shift. Right now, we're probably 85% of our company's revenue is restaurants, but that will flip upside down. Eventually, that will probably be the majority of our revenue will be products and sort of institutional food service, like serving huge campuses, and not actually necessarily making the food, but at least creating the IP and the know-how to fill what we see is going to be a major demand in every sector: hospitals, schools, universities, corporate campuses, and so forth. So that will become really big. Technology and online, different sort of online businesses, direct to consumer. But we're involved in 60 different types of businesses: meal plans, frozen food. We're involved in a huge project in the Middle East. We'll announce in a week or so that will go on for a few months. So yeah, we want to do hotels at some point. Although that's come off my radar a little. I still love restaurants because they're easy for us to do now, but I really am kind of interested in content and what can be done with it.
When you talk about content, is that about training the next generation, expanding and teaching everything that you've kind of learned in your industry, and then creating the next industry of Matthew Kenneys in the world?
Well, it's a good question. So what the funny thing is we're doing the same kind of work in all these different sectors. So you mentioned the udon dish, right? Mm-hmm. So if we develop that udon dish in our test kitchen, typical test kitchen puts it on the restaurant menu and sells as much of it as they can. But when I see that udon dish, I see it in the restaurant, but I also see it in our cookbooks. I see it taught in our schools, of course with changes. But whatever unique techniques are in there, that has a cashew hoisin something in it. So
that's what I would say. It's a whole lot of amazing.
So that can become a product. That broth can become a packaged product. And maybe there's some technology in there along the way as well, and it might become part of a meal plan. So I can think of 8 or 9 ways that we can distribute that content or parts of it. And so that's how I look at pretty much everything that we do.
Well, I hope that you licensed, I think it was the Fudge Fantasy ice cream thing or something like that. It had fudge and ice cream at the New York place.
Oh, I forget. It was so long ago.
It was so long ago, but the last time...
But the fact that you remember it, that's great.
Well, the last time I was actually at the restaurant in New York was, I think, in 2007 or something like that. I forget what it was. And the last time I went, I had a bunch of people. I was celebrating a book launch. And we went to the restaurant for dinner, which tends to happen. My business partner and my friends, we went over to your place for dinner the other night. And I remember walking in saying, I'm not even bothering with the main courses. I'm just ordering desserts. And that dessert has really stuck in my head for years. I keep going down to your restaurant every couple of weeks going, how do they got that down here again?
A lot of people did that. A lot of people did go there for dessert.
Yeah. So I think one of the things I think everyone I think people love to connect around food. It's deep into the social culture of, just building culture. And I think for an artist, and I do believe that anything done at its highest level is artistry. And I consider you a culinary artist among the other characteristics that you have. how do you feel about how you put your personality or your energy, or not the ingredients or not the menu stuff, but that real essence of you that comes out in the food? Because when I go to your restaurants, like I went to your deli, just down the street over here, and I had the bacon, lettuce, and tomato, I think, kind of.
Oh yeah, the T-blot or whatever.
Yeah, whatever. So I used to have those when I was a kid. Now, I've been a plant-based guy for the last 20 years. I haven't had that, but, you know, we went down there, me and my lady went down there the other day, and I said, oh, well, I never had one of these. And I eat it, and I know it's your dish. I know it comes from your brand, and it tastes, and it reminds me of what I had when my mom was making it as a kid, but it's got a whole new flavor. Is there some kind of aspect that you're able to get to that place? Because everybody in the plant food world knows your brand. They know the products. They know your restaurant. They're like, that's the echelon. Is that part of you? Is that part of your personality? Is that your commitment to excellence? What is that? That je ne sais quoi, I guess.
Well, we always, you know, and the more time goes on, the less it's me and the more it's just the people I work with, you know, because we've just been consistent with our style, even though our business strategy and our concepts are always changing. And we've never tried to copy like the flavor of something. It's more about emulating the experience. So the way you just described that is right. When we create a burger, I'm not trying to make it taste like meat, smell like meat, but I want it to be, you know, have the experience of what people do like about eating a burger. You know, it's juicy, it's in two hands, it's like, it's mouthfeel, it's emulating the experience. So without really worrying about the flavor, because we want the flavor to be bringing out the best, you know, potential in the ingredients that it's actually using, as opposed to using them to make them taste like something else.
I just had one of your burgers at Hungry Angelina's in Orange County. And you're right. So that makes sense. There is an experiential factor that I have when I eat at your restaurants that is what you're looking for. Is that really what an excellent food experience is? Like a meal is not really just, hey, it's protein, carbs, fats, whatever. That we've kind of made this nutritional facts panel kind of world of macros and micros and this. But as a chef, is that what it is? You're looking at that experience, and what would culminate? Is it the taste? Is it the texture? Is it the feel?
Yeah, well, it's all of them. You know, a recipe has so many components that are. Texture is really important, but sometimes texture just means smooth and creamy, like mashed, you know, like really good puree potatoes.
Right.
There really isn't any texture, but it is in a way, you know.
It's its own thing.
Yeah. I think it depends on the concept, on the context of where the food is being served. You know, at home, like sometimes I cook for friends. Like the other day, I made a huge paella, you know, and that's just something fun and communal, and so the experience of like eating that way and the aroma that comes from the saffron. Other times, you know, fine dining restaurant, you can really push the boundaries and give people flavors and experiences they've never had before. But like with fast food or New Delhi, it's got to be something craveable that, you know, that you want to have. Because it's unlikely that most people would go, plant food wine is not the best example, but like Vespertine. I don't know if you've been to Vespertine.
I haven't been there yet.
I haven't either, but you know, that's the kind of restaurant you probably go to if you like it once or twice a year, max, maybe just once in a lifetime. And, you know, that can be an otherworldly experience. But like our drive-through, we want people to be, you know, it's almost habit forming. We want people to enjoy it, that breakfast sandwich, and think about it if they haven't had it for a couple of days.
Right.
So the craveable aspect is really, and that leads back, you know, usually to things we grew up with or things that are considered comfort foods and so forth.
I think it was Gary Vaynerchuk said if he could bottle nostalgia and sell it, he said he would really do it. But I love the fact that you're capturing these essences, and I have those experiences, and we were talking a little bit before, and your intentions are getting translated into the world. with a thriving business and kind of, and as you get to that, and I can feel the same aspect with Bioptimizers, is now we have a great team and we have a culture and values, and you try to instill the best aspects of what it is that you want this business to do, and it carries forward through all the people that work with us. And it's remarkable because many of them can do things that I can't do, or far better than I could do, or even hope to do, and yet they carry that culture. How do you curate that or develop that moving forward as your company continues to expand? Like, do you ever worry about maintaining it or losing it, or do those things come into your mind, or do you want it to kind of at some point go beyond yourself? Like, how do you think of that as an entrepreneur and as an artist and a businessman?
Well, there's so much, I have so many thoughts a day on things that I think are priority. Like, as you ask me that, I start to get a little worried because we've opened so many restaurants in the last couple of years that are doing really well. But then 6 years from now, they're all going to be 6-year-old restaurants. Equipment needs to be. So we have to take the same approach with maintenance, for example, because most restaurants, they'll do the minimum, they'll clean, but a 6-year-old, 7-year-old restaurant, it's, starting to get really kind of worn out, and you have to always want to make it feel new. We completely redid the garden at Plant Food and Wine during the pandemic. I mean, from the ground up, it's basically a new garden.
It's gorgeous, by the way.
It used to be wooden tables, now it's all Carrera, it's much brighter, changed the lighting and all of that. So it's, really have to devote time to some things that aren't always so glamorous. Maintenance programs, HR, all of that. But from a strategic perspective, we're really looking at the major components are scalable concepts, a couple of really specific, like our high-end restaurant we're opening in New York called Florizone. It's fine dining French restaurant that we're building. And international relationships, we really have a lot of work to do in Europe and Asia. And but yeah, I kind of know where it can go, but things come up every week that we hadn't envisioned, new ideas and new potential relationships or new opportunities, and we'll pivot it a little bit.
When it comes to restaurants, because I'm always curious about this, because we'll go down and your menu will change periodically, and how do you balance people coming to the restaurant and wanting that thing that they're so familiar with, also staying on the cutting edge to keep your place new, and there's something new to try, let's go. Like, how do you manage the I would say the rate of change and what stays and what evolves?
Yeah, I used to feel like I constantly had to recreate the menus every season, and I would push for change over and over again. But I learned over time, like I said about Vespertine, like guests, even regulars at Plant Food and Wine, they're not there every night. They usually want, you might miss that udon dish if we don't have it. And I think, and it's one of the reasons I like our company doing as much as we're doing, because we don't have to be, too overbearing with pushing for change. We can use our creativity to launch a new concept and use our energy at the existing concepts to just slightly refine them. If something on the menu could be better or would be more acceptable to the general audience, then we'll change that one or two dish. But like Plant Food and Wine, you won't see as much change there anymore. We learned the hard way. Right. We took the kimchi dumplings off the menu and took the lasagna off the menu, and there was outrage.
Picketers outside.
00, we don't really touch the menu. We just do specials once a week. So we haven't changed the menu there in a year and a half.
It's great pizza too. I love that place. I'm familiar with a lot of your brands and your products. Where do you see the next 10, 20 years happening for you, your company brand? Where would you like this all to go? I know you've got a lot of different areas that are really expanding upon the restaurant experience. What do you see happening?
Well, I always envisioned us, a lot of people have like a goal of selling their company or going public, or but there's so much runway, there's so much growth ahead in the plant-based sector. It's really just starting. And I wanted to build a brand that grows beyond me, that I would like to eventually give it a name that isn't my name. And I'd like to navigate well, I just think it will be better when I'm not working there anymore. I think it will be more successful, but who knows? I didn't envision, doing that, but I'm thinking about that. And really just having each of our departments be a little more self-sufficient, but getting support from the core. And I think of us, like you'll have companies that will go public and companies that will sell, and then others have a certain style and they're a holding company for all these ideas. And that's more about what we're about, creating scalable companies underneath the umbrella, or exits for our investors. Like we sold New Delhi this week, actually, to a public company. And now we're going to work with them to open 15 New Delhis over the next year. So those kind of things are what I set out to do from the beginning. And, as those kind of opportunities exist, it allows us to be business responsible and gives us, more leeway to play around with new ideas.
It's kind of like, each one's a child, and you kind of cultivate it, grow it up, it becomes a teenager, fights back a little bit, you kind of resolve all that, and it goes off in the world and does its own little thing. What do you think, where do you, when you talk about runway, and I want to be mindful of your time, when you talk about runway, what do you see for the industry of plant food, say 20 years, 30 years, 50 years down the road?
I think it's going to be, basically a complete global food paradigm shift. So when I grew up in the industry in New York, a restaurant menu would have 12 entrees, 6 from the sea, 6 from the land. Maybe once in a while there would be in a, some hummus or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's already shifting. There are a lot of plant-based options now, and I really think that restaurants that do serve animal products, 20 years from now, it's going to be a very limited part of the menu. So it's a much smaller piece of the pie. But yeah, I think a lot of the foods, I don't like to be too, too much of an activist. I'm not an activist, even though I might think like one sometimes, because I care about the environment and the animals. I stay in my lane as a creator and as a chef. But I think there will be a time when, eating meat is kind of like how, smoking cigarettes is today. My parents smoked when I was young,
Sure.
And it was normal. Everybody did.
Everybody did.
Now, walk down and have a Kenney with a cigarette and see what happens.
But probably not much more of a dangerous action that you could possibly do.
And that's not to say that I'm out there pushing for it or being an activist about it. I just really think that, that we're going to see a major shift because we have to, because of the environment, because of the growing rates of obesity and the growth of our population and the inability to produce animal products to feed such a large population.
Buckminster Fuller once said, "You don't try to condemn or eliminate the old system as you make a new paradigm that is so far superior, the old one drops away."
Yeah.
And it would seem, and of course he was one of the greatest futurists of the world, and I do believe that you are one of the greatest futurists in the realm of food. Is there any final words that you'd like to share with our listeners? I know we have a lot of fans of you that were excited to have this interview and to hear what you have to, anything that you would like to say to them as kind of the avatar, if you will, or this person who's really earned where your success today, and it's well earned, and you fought through all this. Anything that you'd like to share with them that's important as a message that you'd like to carry forward from what you're doing?
Yeah, well, longevity is become my biggest passion, and I think that's so fitting that I'm here with you. No, I just think everybody needs to think broadly, because plants and the plant world, whether it's plant-based supplements or plant-based, food or plant-based clothing, it's really, scaling. There's room for everybody to basically enjoy it, but also to be involved in it on some level, because there will be a lot of disruption, and it's fun to watch. So, I appreciate being here.
Well, this is a great interview. I was super excited about it because I've followed your work for literally since 2004, and it concorded with my, I remember, getting started in the plant food industry, and then I remember my first plant-based burger that I'd given that up for years, and then I had one. I was like, wow. And then I first got exposed to your books, and then having friends make that food, and then going to your restaurants, and then seeing this flourish. And I always think that things that are really good and wholesome for the world tend to work out over time. So I wish you the best of success in your career.
Thanks so much.
Continue on. Thank you.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip. Turn cultured foods into superfoods. Raw fermented foods like sauerkraut and low sugar live yogurt can be good for you, but rarely have enough of the right probiotic strains for therapeutic benefit. So here's a way that you can turn them into superfoods. What I do is I get some raw sauerkraut or a healthy yogurt. Ideally, it's grass-fed or coconut-based, and you can empty 3 caps of P3OM into a container and mix it up thoroughly. Leave it at room temperature for a couple of hours before putting it back into the fridge. And what's going to happen is these probiotic levels will be multiplied. In fact, it doubles every 20 minutes. And then what you're going to get is you're going to have a food with strong proteolytic activity. To learn more about P3OM and why its patented strains make it the strongest probiotic available, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.